As the modern-day incarnation of the ancient mystery schools, the New Age movement worships the serpent both literally and symbolically. Perhaps the most blatant manifestation of this serpent worship is through what is known as the Kundalini, or serpent energy, the latent divine power believed to be lying dormant within each person. In the glossary to her theosophical devotional called The Voice of the Silence, Blavatsky defined the Kundalini as, quote, serpentine or the annular power on account of its spiral-like working or progress in the body of the ascetic developing the power in himself. It is an electric, fiery, occult, or phohatic power, the great pristine force, which underlies all organic and inorganic matter. According to the New Age, the Kundalini, which Alice Bailey defined as the fire at the base of the spine, can be awakened through practices like yoga and meditation, and once it is aroused, the Kundalini then activates 7 focal points of energy in the body, called chakras, as it is raised up a person's spine. Alice Bailey taught that the awakening of the Kundalini energy is a critical part of the New Age initiation process. In a treatise on white magic, she stated that when the Kundalini energy is aroused, it, quote, correctly makes possible the final initiations into the consciousness of the monad, or God. The Kundalini concept is essentially an occult metaphorical twist on the Garden of Eden account, with the notion of the serpent bringing the gift of God consciousness or divine wisdom. Professor John White, who has extensively researched the occult sciences of meditation and higher human development, comments on the Kundalini and its correlation with achieving godhood. Quote, nearly all the world's major religions, spiritual paths, and genuine occult traditions see something akin to the Kundalini experience as having significance in divinizing a person. The word itself may not appear in the traditions, but the concept is there nevertheless, wearing a different name, yet recognizable as a key to attaining godlike stature. The Kundalini and 7 chakra centers have been a central part of the mystery school teachings since ancient times. One Hindu esoteric author confirms this, quote, the ancient symbol of serpent in all the ancient mystery schools of the world is a codified secret symbol of the human vital energy flow channels, represented in the physical body by the spinal cord, through which the vital life force, prana, in the form of a snake motion, moves in the chakras, vortex of energies. New Age author Daniel E. Mitchell claims the same. Quote, there were 7 levels of these mystery schools that taught Arit Sekam, which means the serpent power. It was about connecting with the 7 energy points of the holy serpent fire of God within them, while traveling upon the mystical path that leads to the awakening of the Christ consciousness. Describing what occurs when the Kundalini is awakened, New Age author Cindy Dale states, our full physical and spiritual selves begin to merge. In Samadhi, all aspects of our true being, now fully activated by the Kundalini, can achieve a state of union with the divine and empower us to become our real selves. Commenting on the rise in popularity of the Kundalini in America and the influence of Eastern spiritual teacher Gopi Krishna, Christian author John Newport writes, Gopi Krishna devoted much of his life to learning everything he could about Kundalini. He considered it the most jealously guarded secret in history and the guardian of human evolution. He believed it to be the driving force behind genius and inspiration. Gopi Krishna was eager to see Kundalini awakening cultivated, especially in the West. Since the 1970s, Kundalini awakenings have been reported with an increasing frequency in the West.
With the arousal of this power, a stream of silvery energy rushes up the spine and reaches the brain.
Kundalini is a very powerful energy, and when it begins to wake up, it's almost like this force that's trying to rise up our spine.
I started experiencing energetic flows inside my body, going up my spine during that meditation.
And it clears the chakras as it moves up. I can actually feel it moving in my body.
Kundalini serpent, the energy that can rises up, your animal energy can become the coronated serpent.
In fact, the brain is now fed with a more powerful energy than before.
It felt like my entire brain just lit up, like a current shot up my back into my brain.
Which causes it to become luminous.
This gray, white, luminous energy.
It expands my consciousness.
and expanded my consciousness.
And, I had experience of huge expanded, like, cosmic consciousness.
An expansion within our own consciousness,
which we can conquer through the expansion of consciousness.
So it's like my senses had expanded. It was weird. I felt connected to everything.
It was like I was face to face with God.
Ever take you to a crazy place, like psychedelic state?
Yeah, I had that realization that what I considered to be myself was a construction and it wasn't real. That, like, my memories and my perception and my desires are just a conglomeration of biochemical impulses, that I'm merely a conduit of pure consciousness.
This experience of God or cosmic consciousness is actually an experience of a higher form of consciousness towards which mankind is evolving at present. Just as man climbed from the state of an animal to that of a man, he has to take another leap to reach a higher dimension of consciousness where he can perceive the creative energies of the universe.
33rd degree Freemason Manly P. Hall explains the occult significance of the Kundalini serpent. Quote, that sleeping serpent power in man, which coiled head downward around the tree of life, drove him from the garden of the Lord and became the symbol of the Christ. The Pharaoh was an initiate of Scorpio, and the serpent is the transmuted Scorpio energy, which, working upward in the regenerated individual, is called the Kundalini. This serpent was the sign of initiation. It meant that within him the serpent had been raised, for the true Pharaoh was a priest of God, as well as a master of men. Hall also correlated the Kundalini serpent with the Garden of Eden. Quote, the tree that grows in the midst of the garden is the spinal fire, or Kundalini energy. The knowledge of the use of that spinal fire is the gift of the great serpent. Knowing this, it should be no surprise that Satanists take a liking to the concept of the Kundalini. On an openly satanic website, it states, the serpent or snake, which symbolizes Satan, represents the Kundalini at the base of the spine, also the DNA. The serpent represents life. When this force is activated, we are healed and enlightened. Satanist Aleister Crowley also believed in the power of the Kundalini energy. He spoke of, quote, the serpent flame, and encouraged everyone to, quote, arouse the coiled splendor within you. Along these lines, some reports of what people undergo during a Kundalini awakening share a very eerie similarity with accounts of individuals who have experienced demonic possession.
Also, I've noticed that my body has started to jerk around unexpectedly.
And when it first moved, it was so intense that, I had convulsions, seizures, incredible neurological disorders, loss of memory, couldn't sleep. It was a really crazy experience. And it's funny because, like, when it was happening with me, people would see me and, my body would be shaking or trembling. And, I was experiencing absolute bliss, but when, friends and family or whatever, I even went and saw doctors and neurologists, all kinds of stuff. People would look at me and they'd turn pale because they were like, oh my God, there's something really wrong with this guy, and nobody could figure it out. I knew what it was all along. But the Kundalini force in general can be quite powerful and create intense havoc for us. Some people get stuck like this, or their eyes roll back in their head, and that's helpful for a lot of people to kind of wake up the divine energy within us, open our channels, and help those energies to move. But Kundalini energy is just an amazing force. I found yoga to be extremely helpful, and some forms of yoga were helpful.
You just have to be completely dedicated to the Kundalini practice, and you have to go to a very specific state that's achievable once you have some mastery over the meditation and the yoga principles.
Doing Kundalini yoga oftentimes is a very good way to balance your chakras, balance your energy body, so you can stay as grounded as one can in the midst of their awakening.
Teachings on yoga. See multiple books here on yoga. Ani Yoga. Here's another one. Yogi philosophy.
yoga in any way, shape, or form has the ability to corrupt the mind and undo a Christian's faith. It has as its goal the conversion of the individual into the occult. Yoga is from the Sanskrit word yug, meaning union with the divine or your higher self or your God self. Again, it's always about attaining godhood. I will be like the Most High. I will ascend unto the sides of the north, just like Satan did. And this is evidently the temptation for man. Consider the following portion from an article from a secular newspaper. It is estimated that there are 10,000 yoga teachers in the United States who teach between 4 and 5 million students a week. Man, that's a lot of people they're reaching.
Kundalini awakening is typically believed to be inseparable from the practice of yoga, which also has occult and mystical roots. In his book, Yoga Sutras, the textbook of yoga psychology, Eastern spiritual guru Ramamurti Mishra states, in conclusion, it may be said that behind every psychic investigation, behind mysticism, occultism, etc., knowingly or unknowingly, the yoga system is present. Authors John Ankerberg and John Weldon state in the Encyclopedia of New Age Beliefs, quote, even yoga authorities have said that all yoga is ultimately Kundalini yoga, and that yoga is meaningless without it. This is why no less an authority than Hans Riker concludes, Kundalini is the mainstay of all yoga practices. Even Bailey and Blavatsky affirm that yoga and Kundalini awakening went hand in hand. Alice Bailey stated that Kundalini is, quote, a power known only to those who practice concentration in yoga, and is centered within the spine. And Blavatsky considered yoga philosophy to be one of the occult sciences, and referred to the Kundalini as, quote, one of the mystic yogi powers. The testimonies of virtually every yoga teacher destroy the false notion typically held by many in the West that yoga can be done purely for bodily exercise. Not only are the vast majority of yoga instructors well educated in the mystical components of yoga and are often devoted followers of those mystical teachings, but yoga classes typically involve many references to occult and pagan concepts and require that their students participate in them. Identifying the spiritual components and intentions underlying the yoga practice, yoga teacher Lauren Walker states, quote, the magic of yoga is the ability to transform not only your body but also your mind and, by extension, your spirit. Although calming and stabilizing the breath is one big reason yoga has this effect on us, the specific intention behind the movements is what really makes yoga transformative. Many cultures, including Native American, Islamic, and ancient Sumerian cultures, have used movements very similar to some of the yoga movements for prayer, healing, and, we can only assume, physical well-being. There are hieroglyphs depicting some of the oldest physical movements performed by humans that look very similar to yoga poses. The movements can transform us on every level. According to Hindu tradition, man can achieve salvation and ascension through the mastery of yoga. William Quan Judge, one of the co-founders of the Theosophical Society, claimed that yoga was one of the primary methods of unleashing the all-powerful God force and awakening our higher self. He stated in Practical Occultism, quote, the true practice of yoga begins by purifying the heart. Its perfection is not attainable until the personal idea is completely uprooted. You have in you the self all-powerful and omniscient. It cannot act because the lower self hinders it. The hindrances must be got rid of. The way to do it is in Patanjali's Yoga and Bhagavad Gita. Esoteric researcher Mark Pinkham, author of the book The Return of the Serpents of Wisdom, claims that the first teachers of yoga were ascended beings called Kumaras. In the Theosophical Glossary, Madame Blavatsky defined the Kumaras as, quote, the 7 sons of Brahma, born out of the limbs of the god in the so-called 9th creation. It is stated that the name was given to them owing to their formal refusal to procreate their species, and so they remained yogis, as the legend says. In The Secret Doctrine, Blavatsky elaborated further on the Kumaras, revealing that they are one and the same with the fallen angels of the Bible. Quote, of all the 7 great divisions of Dayan Koans or Devas, there is none with which humanity is more concerned than with the Kumaras. Imprudent are the Christian theologians who have degraded them into fallen angels, and now call them Satan and demons. The implications of this are obvious and serious. Mankind learned yoga from the fallen angels.
So the serpent shows up in Genesis 3. It shows up very early, very, very early in God's relationship with mankind. And if you'll notice when it shows up in the context of wisdom. And that theme is followed throughout culture and history. All over this world, cultures have equated the serpent with wisdom. The wisdom of the world, and the wisdom we're talking about here with satanic wisdom or serpent wisdom, is the wisdom that can be gained or understood by initiation. If you remember last week, I told you how that when you get into Kundalini Yoga, this serpent that lies at the base of the spine, that wraps itself around your spine and protrudes its head across the top of your head, once you've reached that state of illumination or enlightenment through the 7 chakras or power points throughout your body, and each one of these chakras or places of power or illumination is reached by the initiate through a system of meditation, study, learning, enlightenment. Once you go through these 7 successive stages and find and end up with the one at the top, then you have reached the place of what's called an avatar, or one who is a guru or a teacher of others. And you are at that point ready to ascend. And this is what they call the Lord Jesus Christ. They call him an ascended master.
Esoteric researcher Mark Pinkham contends that today we are experiencing a worldwide rebirth of the cult of the serpent that will soon culminate in the return of ascended beings from heaven and the establishment of a global New Age utopia. When we clearly see the serpent teachings of yoga and Kundalini awakening rapidly spreading all around us, it is difficult to dismiss Pinkham's claims. We are indeed experiencing a global initiation into the religion of the serpent, the worldwide institution of the mystery religions, as prophesied in the book of Revelation, which speaks of the rise of Mystery Babylon in the final days before the second coming of Christ. Through the New Age movement, the serpent is increasingly being understood as a symbol of enlightenment and wisdom, as the path to godhood. It is truly a global reenactment of the Garden of Eden, and it is all connected to Blavatsky's proclamation that the serpent of Genesis is the true spiritual liberator of mankind. And this is why what is occurring today with the Lucis Trust in the United Nations is a clear fulfillment of Bible prophecy about the end times and the coming of the Antichrist.
We are confronted throughout history with certain symbols. One of them is the serpent, which was always much in evidence wherever the ancient temples devoted to wisdom flourished. Since the old story of Adam and Eve, the serpent has represented 2 things: knowledge and sex. And the secret is that the creative force within us is one single force. But as man aspires to higher ideals, as he yearns to create mentally and live in the spirit, the force is gradually drawn upwards to the creative principles in the brain. This force is called by the Easterns the Kundalini, and is likened to a serpent of fire lying coiled at the base of the spine. The man is then filled with the inspiration and becomes attuned to the inner world of wisdom. He can then deliberately wield and mold with his mind creative patterns which will help to shape the future. He is no longer confined to the haphazard creative efforts of the average man. He can create from the inside with the invisible sources of all things. This can only be accomplished with the help of the Kundalini serpents. Men and women have therefore the choice as to what they will do with this power within them. Man is a god in the making, and the goal is waiting before him.